The wall shouldn't have a voice. Sister Margaret knew every crack in the chapel stone. 23 years kneeling in the same pew. 23 years of silence. Until tonight. 3 words, through the wall, her name, and a question she thought she'd buried. Did you choose this? The voice belonged to someone who'd watched her take her vows, someone she'd run from, someone who shouldn't be alive. Margaret's hands found the rosary. Muscle memory. But the beads wouldn't stay still between her fingers, because that voice, she'd heard it once, 23 years ago, in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and goodbye. Her sister, Claire. The doctors had given her weeks, maybe days. Margaret had been 24. Claire was 26. They'd shared everything growing up. A bedroom, secrets, dreams about the boys they'd marry, the lives they'd build, the apartment they'd rent together in the city, the double wedding they'd joked about since they were 12, until Claire got sick. It started small, fatigue, bruises that took too long to fade. Then came the tests, the waiting rooms, the doctor's face when he said the word neither of them wanted to hear. Margaret visited every day, held Claire's hand through the pain, through the fear, through the moments when Claire would grip so tight it left marks that lasted for hours. And then came the question, the one Margaret wasn't ready for. Claire's voice, barely a whisper. If I don't make it, ... Promise me you'll live enough for both of us. Margaret had promised, of course she had. She'd held Claire's hand tighter, said yes, said she would, said anything to make Claire believe there was a future worth imagining. 3 days later, the hospital called. Claire had passed in the night. Peacefully, they said. Margaret didn't go to the viewing, couldn't. The thought of seeing Claire's body still empty, dressed in something she'd never have chosen, made her chest so tight she couldn't breathe. She'd broken her promise in the worst way. Instead of living twice as hard, she'd stopped living entirely. The grief wasn't sharp, it was suffocating. A weight that pressed on her chest every morning when she woke up and remembered Claire was gone. 6 months later, she took her vows, not because God called her, because silence felt safer than trying. The convent didn't ask questions, didn't expect her to be happy, just present, just obedient, just quiet, and for 23 years, that had been enough. Until a voice from behind the chapel wall said her name, in a voice she'd buried with a death certificate. Margaret's knees wouldn't hold. She pressed both palms against the pew in front of her. The wood was smooth, real, solid. The voice came again. Margaret, I know you can hear me. Not through the wall. Behind it, there was a gap, small, hidden behind the wooden panel near the altar. Margaret had noticed it years ago during renovation and maintenance access to the old heating ducts that ran beneath the chapel. But no one used it. No one even remembered it existed. Her throat closed. Who? The word barely made it out. Who are you? Silence. Then you know who I am. The way she said it. The slight rasp on the vowels. The breath before the consonants. The rhythm that matched Margaret's own. Claire. Margaret's body moved before her mind caught up. 3 steps to the wall. Hands flat against the stone. Cold. Solid. Real. You can't be here. Margaret whispered. You're dead. The voice had a sad smile in it. That's what everyone thinks. Margaret's chest burned. I was at your funeral. No, you weren't. The truth hit like a fist. She hadn't been. She'd told everyone she was too devastated, too fragile. Couldn't bear to see Claire one last time. She'd stayed in her apartment, alone, numb, staring at the wall where they'd hung photos from childhood. Claire's gap-toothed smile at 7. Both of them at prom. The last picture they'd taken together. Claire thin but smiling. Margaret's arm around her shoulders, both pretending everything would be fine. Why? Margaret's voice cracked. Why would you let me think? Because you were drowning. The voice was soft now, gentle, and I thought, ... If I was gone, you'd finally swim. Margaret's knees buckled. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold chapel floor. I looked for you, Margaret said. After, I went to your apartment. Your things were gone. Your landlord said your family had cleared it out. Every trace of you, like you'd never existed. They did, and you just let them. I was in a clinic, across the country. Experimental treatment, long shot, a breath. It worked. Margaret's hands clenched into fists. You've been alive for 23 years. Yes, and you never. Her voice rose. You never thought to tell me. I tried. The chapel door, 10 years ago. A woman standing in the rain, asking for Sister Margaret. Mother Superior had turned her away. Said Sister Margaret was in prayer. Couldn't be disturbed. Had taken a vow of limited contact with the outside world. Margaret had seen her from the window, dark hair soaked through, thin frame, shivering in a coat too light for November. Something familiar about the way she stood, weight on one foot, shoulders slightly hunched, but she'd been too afraid to go down, too afraid of the world outside these walls, too afraid that opening that door would mean facing everything she'd run from. "That was you," Margaret whispered. "That was me." Margaret pressed her forehead against the stone. Why now? Why come back? The silence stretched, long enough that Margaret thought maybe the voice had been a hallucination. A break. 23 years of repression finally cracking her mind open. Then, because I'm dying. For real this time, the world tilted. The treatment bought me time. 2 decades I shouldn't have had, but it's back, spread too far this time. And this time, there's no experimental anything. No miracles left. Margaret couldn't breathe. How long? Weeks, maybe less. The doctor said I could try another round, but, double quotes, a pause. I'm tired, Margaret. I've been fighting for 23 years, and I'm ready to stop. And you came here too to ask if you chose this. The voice was firmer now. The habit, the vows, the silence. Did you choose it or did you just, give up? Margaret's hands trembled against the stone, because she didn't have an answer. I don't know, Margaret finally said. The admission felt like falling. I don't know if I chose this or if I just, ran. From what? Margaret closed her eyes. From you. From the promise. From the idea that I was supposed to live twice as much and I didn't know how to live at all. The voice behind the wall was quiet. Then, tell me about your life here. What your life the last 23 years? Tell me. Margaret opened her mouth. Nothing came, because what was there to tell? She woke at 5 a.m., prayed, worked in the garden, prayed, ate in silence, prayed, read scripture, prayed, slept, every day, the same, for 23 years. Her voice broke. I help with meals, and the first maintain the chapel, and I tend the roses by the east wall, and are you happy? The question was so simple, so impossible. I'm at peace. That's not what I asked. Margaret's chest tightened. Happiness felt selfish. After you. After what what I didn't do. You mean the funeral? I mean all of it. The words came faster now, spilling out after years of being locked away. I wasn't there when you needed me most. That last week, you asked me to stay overnight, to sleep in the chair by your bed, and I said I would, but I didn't. I couldn't watch you slip away. So I went home, told myself I'd come back in the morning. I'd have one more day, one more chance, and then the hospital called at 3 a.m., and then I was gone. And you were gone. Margaret's hands covered her face. I killed you, in my mind, because I couldn't face what I'd done, couldn't face that the last thing you asked me for, I didn't give you. So I came here. To a place where no one would ask me to give anything, where I could hide behind prayers and pretend it was devotion instead of cowardice. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of 23 years, of choices made in fear, of a life half-lived behind stone walls and whispered prayers. Then Claire's voice came through the wall, softer than before. You didn't kill me, Margaret. You were 24 and terrified. That's not an excuse, no, but it's human. And you've been punishing yourself for being human for 23 years. Margaret lowered her hands. Why did you really come here? Because I have weeks, maybe less, and I don't want to spend them wondering if my little sister is actually living, or just waiting to die in a different building. The truth of it landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading. Margaret had been waiting to die for 23 years. The panel, Margaret said suddenly, the one behind the altar. You're in the access corridor, yes? Come out, let me see you. I can't. Why not? Because if you see me, Claire's voice wavered. If you see what the illness has done, you'll remember me like this, not the way I was. And I don't want that to be your last memory of me. Not again. Margaret's throat burned. You think I care what you look like? I care. Margaret stood, slowly. Her legs felt like water. You came all this way, broke into a convent, hid in a maintenance corridor, whispered through a wall. And now you won't even let me see you. Margaret, I don't need you to be beautiful. Claire, I don't need you to be healthy or strong or anything other than here, real, alive. I need you to be real. The silence stretched, then a sound, fabric shifting, weight moving against stone. Margaret walked to the wooden panel. Her hands found the edge. It was loose, designed to swing open for maintenance access. She pulled. The woman behind it wasn't the Claire from 23 years ago. Her hair was thin, gray at the temples. Her frame was too small inside a coat that didn't fit anymore. Dark circles under her eyes, skin pale in the dim light. But her eyes were exactly the same, green with gold flecks, the left one slightly bigger than the right. The same eyes that had looked at Margaret across a shared bedroom, across a hospital bed, across 23 years of absence. "Hi," Claire said. Margaret's knees gave out, not from shock, from relief. "You're here," Margaret whispered. "I'm here. You're real." Claire stepped through the gap, knelt beside her sister on the cold chapel floor. "I'm real." Margaret reached out. Her hand shook. Claire took it, and Margaret felt it. The warmth, the pulse under thin skin, the slight tremble that matched her own. 23 years of guilt, of silence, of half-living, and in that touch, permission to let it go. They sat like that, on the floor of the chapel, hands clasped, neither speaking. Outside, the wind picked up. Rain started to tap against the stained glass windows. "I'm sorry," Margaret finally said. "For what?" "For not being there. At the end. The first time." Claire squeezed her hand. "You're here now." "I don't know how to leave," Margaret said. "I know. I don't know who I am without this place. I know, but I think I want to find out." Claire's eyes filled with tears. Yet, Margaret looked around the chapel one last time. The altar she'd polished every week for 23 years. The pews she'd memorized. The stained glass window that caught the afternoon light and threw colors across the stone floor. She'd thought this place had saved her. But it had just been a different kind of cage. Margaret stood, helped Claire to her feet. "How much time do we have?" Margaret asked. "Weeks, maybe a month if I'm lucky. Then we don't waste a single day." Claire's eyes filled again. "You'd leave, after 23 years. Margaret looked around the chapel one last time. The stones she'd memorized, the silence she'd hidden inside. "I didn't choose this. Not really. I was running." She turned back to Claire. "But I'm choosing this, right now. You." They walked to the chapel door together, Margaret's hand on the handle. One push, and she'd be outside these walls for the first time in 2 decades. No habit, no vows, no safety, just her sister. And whatever time they had left, Margaret pushed. The night air hit her face, cold, real, terrifying, perfect. They stepped into the courtyard. The convent loomed behind them, dark except for a few lit windows where the other sisters were preparing for bed. "Where do we go?" Claire asked. Margaret smiled. "Small, fragile, but real. I don't know. But I have a promise to keep." "What promise?" "To live enough for both of us." Claire laughed, soft, a little broken. "I think we can manage that." They walked toward the gate. Margaret had never been allowed to pass through it alone, had never wanted to, until now. Behind them, the chapel bell rang for midnight prayer. No one would notice Sister Margaret was missing, not until morning. By then, she'd be hours away, with her sister, finally living, finally free. And when the time came when Claire took her last breath, Margaret would be there, holding her hand, present. "Enough. We all have someone we failed to show up for. A moment we thought we'd get back to. Maybe you replay it at 2 a.m., the call you didn't take, the visit you postponed, the promise you meant to keep. Just here, just between us. If you could go back to that moment, what would you do differently?"